these younger Democrats understand partisanship. And I think that's going to be important going forward. And it's somewhat encouraging. Joe Biden's out there like going around now, almost like on a campaign tour. Presumably he'll need to sort of take a little bit of a rest and then do it again, like, 3 or 4 months. But he's going out there and he's taking advantage of that moment in the State of the Union, which apparently, in terms of polling, for whatever it's worth, he did quite well.
I mean,
like significantly, like somewhere, in terms of like the people's skepticism towards him, like a 40 point jump in some moments.
I mean, just from the eye and ear test, it was great. But
he took that moment where the Republicans basically screamed out, we promise not to touch Social Security and Medicare, and is now going around and making him say it over and over again. But the problem is that everybody knows you cannot trust them when it comes to Social Security and Medicare. You simply cannot trust them in that situation. Here is the latest example of this. They're out there trying to claim that they're trying to claim that they're not in support of cutting Social Security. We know Rick Scott is out there saying we should have these laws reauthorized, which of course makes Social Security easier to cut. And here is Ron Johnson, honestly, one of the stupidest people probably to hold office, maybe in the history of the country.
Yeah.
And here he is talking about Social Security. And
in August, he made a suggestion that Social Security and Medicare should be moved into discretionary spending. So Ron Johnson himself has been speaking about and flirting with publicly for a while.
Why else would
Social
you want
Security and Medicare? Why would you move it to discretionary spending if you don't want it cut?
Why would you want to give people the discretion to cut it? That's what it is. Because they already have the discretion to expand it. Why would you want to give people the discretion to cut it if you weren't interested in cutting it? There's no reason. And then listen to how he characterizes Social Security. This is the dead giveaway.
Like adults.
Talking with Senator Ron Johnson, of course. One of the few bipartisan applause lines of Tuesday night was related to the notion that both sides should agree not to touch Social Security and Medicare. I get the reflexive political applause to that idea, but these entitlement programs do need reforms, and they don't have to be cuts, but they need reforms, and we do need serious adults in Washington, D.C. who are willing to take on the challenge and do the work instead of engaging in this political arson against each side when it's even mentioned. Would you agree with that?
No.
Yes, that's why what I've talked about, from the first time around in 2010, I just laid out the reality of Social Security. It's a legal Ponzi scheme. It is. I mean, it's a pay-as-you-go system.
All right, let's be clear about something. One, what reform are we talking about if not cuts? And if the reform is, there's one reform. There's one reform that does not involve cuts, and that is you lift the Social Security cap. The cap on what income Social Security payroll taxes are applied to. And then I guess you could also have one other reform, which is let's also do this for capital gains.
Boom.
There's no other tweaking that doesn't involve cuts. You could raise the retirement age, and that is a cut. It's a cut. You could slow the cost of living increases. That is a cut. Period. End of story. And as far as it being a Ponzi scheme, it is not a Ponzi scheme, legal or otherwise. A Ponzi scheme is when you pay out investors in a fund, let's say, with new money that's coming in.
You're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
But the problem is that at one point, you're going to run out of investors. Mm-hmm. At one point, you're going to run out of investors, and those nascent investors, those latest investors, they could also ask for their money out. And that's when Ponzi schemes fall apart. When you either run out of people to invest in a Ponzi scheme, or the people whose last money was in decides like, I want out. I don't like my returns, or I need my cash. I want to buy a boat or whatever it is. And the difference between that and Social Security is that To argue that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, you would have to argue that there will be no more workers tomorrow or in 10 years or in 5 years or in 20 years or in 30 years, that there'll be no economy from then. And if that's the case, we have other problems aside from the fact that Social Security is not going to be there. You would have to assume that all the workers in this country are going to go away. That will not happen. The other thing you would have to assume is that some 45-year-old who said, like, I've been paying into Social Security for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. I want my money now. But you can't do that.
Nope.
You can't get it until, I think, like, the earliest you can draw is 62. You can get early Social Security, I think. So it is not a Ponzi scheme in terms of the definition of the word. There is no way to change it from anything else than a social insurance program. In fact, if you believe that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, you also have to believe that every insurance policy that anyone holds is, in fact, a Ponzi scheme. But it's not.
And why would you call it a Ponzi scheme if your reform was not to cut it?
Well, how about having this entire conversation of, everyone's being too political. We need mature adults. And it's like, yeah, that's why I call it a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, right. Without knowing the definition of the word, I guess. But so very helpful. Thank you, Ron Johnson, for saying that on Thursday of last week.
That you don't want to cut the Ponzi scheme. Reform it.
Right, exactly.
This is the equivalent of George Bush going down into the basement of the Treasury and going like, here's your Social Security. It's just pieces of paper.
Yeah.
In these file cabinets, just IOUs.
It's actually a social construct.
IOUs. It's not real. There's no gold here. It's no gold or freeze-dried food. It's just pieces of paper saying IOU from the Treasury Department.
And what is money anyway?
Of course, we refer to those as Treasury bills, and don't worry, all those guys from PIMCO who own treasuries, they'll get their money. But for the rest of you, it's just an IOU. Do we have another clip of Ron Johnson sort of doubling down on this? This guy's going around, he thinks he's actually helping. He loves going on Joey Pags' show. Joey Pags.
Again, it is a legal Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
I got accused in 2010 that I called it a Ponzi scheme. I admitted it. Yes, it's a legal Ponzi scheme. It operates the same way as any other Ponzi scheme, except that this is sanctioned by the U.S. government. But it's no less irresponsible than a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, this is the problem. Again, why is a Ponzi scheme irresponsible, or why is it illegal? It is because at one point the music stops and somebody's left without a chair on a Ponzi scheme. And the music either stops because you run out of new investors to get to invest in your scheme, or the existing investors want to take their money out. And again, for this to happen, for this to be an actual Ponzi scheme, we would have to run out of workers soon. And in fact, like, you got Generation Z, is it? Or that is as big as the boomers? That's going to pump a bunch of money into Social Security. And if we raise the cap and get to where we have been traditionally in terms of like taxing, I think it's 90% of the dollars in this country, we're going to be fine. But they call it a Ponzi scheme to pretend like it's in crisis. And then they come and they complain, and then they we got to fix it.
Yeah.
And the way we fix it is we cut it. It is an insurance policy.
Not everybody has the same insurance policy that, say, Ron Johnson's kids do. Ron Johnson, who hasn't paid Wisconsin taxes in years, they have trust funds. And this is just like a micro state, federal version of people to have some sort of security in their lives, much less than the security that he has afforded to his kids, in part by not paying his fair share in taxes.
So it's great that Biden's going around and hammering this. And it's great that Ron Johnson's too stupid to realize that every time he goes out there and flaps his mouth about this, he's helping.
Was it Chuck Grassley, 90 million years old Chuck Grassley, who said that like right before the election, called Ron Johnson's comments stupid on this?
I think it was Rick Scott.
Might have been.
Was it? Or I don't know. It
But
could have
either
been
way,
one.
Rick Scott and Ron Johnson doing God's work for the Democratic Party.
Yes, much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
This is an unfair attack.
What do we got here? All right, let's go. We'll open up the phone line. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number.